Hey, what's up, everybody? Video 44 coming at you another video. All right. So, walking down the street feeling weak as I've felt in months. Just not healthy right now. But I was going to climb the hill over there, but I decided, nah, let's just keep going. I'll save the energy for the walk. And yeah, man, I was thinking about a few things that I saw online this morning in regards to Gaza. And it's just, it's like a. I don't know, man. I just feel like now that people are starting to become aware of what's going on there, it's a lot of different factors that play into it. And one of the factors that are starting to come around is people resenting the concerns of people who are not who are without perspective on things being so much worse than what they're experiencing. And they mean well, but just like we talked about in a previous video, when someone hasn't been through a lot, they don't handle the very little that they go through very well. And not only do they not handle what they go through very well, but they also find themselves detached from understanding the resilience that someone else has and the irritation of that person who has that resilience, and listening to them complain about the problems that they have, right? So like somebody who's been living homeless for like 2 years in a row, who may have just gotten out of that situation, finally got an apartment, but their apartment has roaches, and they hear somebody else complaining about roaches. It's like, you don't know what I've been through. Like, this is not that big a deal. It isn't a convenience, but it's not the end of the world. It's just where somebody else who lived in a mansion their whole life, who ain't never seen as much as a roach, who had maids and all this and that, they find themselves spending one night in that spot where it's a bunch of roaches. And, you know, they find themselves complaining about it, not being able to sleep, and all these different types of things that come with just not being used to that type of situation. And so it's a little bit of that going on right now as in regards to a lot of people who are experiencing what's going on in Gaza for the first time, people who are just now waking up to the understanding, people who may have no understanding of what's going on there, but may have a different idea about their political points of view, and they may have a sad feeling about how that situation went or what have you. And then you got a facet of people who have been aware of a lot of what it is I've been talking about, who are irritated with those people who have those points of views that may appear to have very little resilience attached to it, or very little perspective attached to it, or even may sound like they have no respect for the truth of what it is that's been going on. So it's hard to really put into words, but I'm just seeing a resistance to people's perspectives. And, you know, I mean, I find myself trying to be open-minded, just to say, I've watched myself go through circumstances that have made my resilience and my appreciation for suffering, so to speak, appreciation for lending a hand or having more integrity. I've now seen myself go through different phases of that, as to where the same things that I used to think I couldn't experience and couldn't live with, I now live with on a daily basis. The very things that I thought I couldn't do or saw no reason to do for the betterment of my own character, I now take pride in doing. So it's like when you see yourself go through that same, that cycle, that threshold or whatever, where you go from not respecting certain things to respecting them, or even seeing other people. You know, I told you guys about an ex-girlfriend of mine who, when I first met her, you know, she had a perspective on homelessness that I thought was extremely shallow. But where she was from, they didn't have a lot of homelessness. You know, she had never seen a street where a bunch of people are lined up, you know what I mean? And I remember thinking how far detached she sounded, and how, you know, callous she sounded to me when we were having that conversation. And I watched her go through her own version of homelessness thereafter, come through that. Years pass after going through that, and now hear her perspective on such things. It's the polar opposite. So when you not only have gone through your own journey in that regard, but you also watch other people you're close to go through that journey, you tend to understand that it is a journey. And then within that, you sometimes have to be patient with people who are at the beginning of their journey. And shunning them for not having the perspective that you have holds very little purpose in regards to helping them respect you, relate to you, and or continue to have concern about what it is that ultimately they don't necessarily respect very much. I think it does the polar opposite. I understand the frustration in listening to people complain about what we consider shallow opinions, but I also understand that they're on the beginning of a journey, and by the time they're at the end of that journey, they too will have a certain strength about them that'll help them understand why they should respect certain things that maybe they don't respect very much right now. You gotta let people go through that journey. You can't force them into where you're at by way of your frustration and you expressing that frustration. Now, everybody's feelings are valid, is what I want to say too. The shallow person's feelings and their discomforts hold validity, as well as those of us who've been through a little more, and maybe those who've been through much more than us. All will need coaching or patience or some peace away from, or however that goes, for whatever bit of what we go through. And so to understand that, one person going through having their car stolen, for example, one person may go through that and be like, man, it's like the third time this happened, I'm frustrated, but I know how to handle it. Another person may go through it and want to unalive themselves, you know what I mean? Like, people have different thresholds for what they go through, different experiences having given them a certain level of resilience. And we need to, I think, if we're going to be constructive in the world around us, we got to learn to respect one another's differences in that way. Some people can handle a little more than others. Some people are going to complain about the littlest, smallest thing, and calling them the worst things in the world, and pointing out all of the flaws in their resilience or in their practice doesn't necessarily bring about a constructive environment, in my opinion. So that's kind of what it is for me. And listening to people complaining on the internet, I found myself saying, I get it. She's frustrated because there was a lady up there talking about how she felt that, there were a lot of people who were upset about just, how the election went. And they didn't pay much mind to why certain people voted away from who lost. You know what I mean? What was the cause of people moving away from her and why that mattered? And you know what I mean? It's like people just didn't have the knowledge of the circumstances that we talk about every day on this phone that are going on in the Middle East right now. They didn't understand it. So it's like when you see people walk away not having the same intensity about those conversations, it can get a little frustrating for a lot of us who've been witnessing the worst of those circumstances, who've had conversations that help us understand context for why we should care about what's going on in those circumstances. And you have conversations with people who don't understand those circumstances, and it's like, well, why don't you care? It's because they're lacking the context that you have that allows for you to. And they're in the environment for which it's okay to not even give a damn about those circumstances. And you know what I mean? So it's like, if you want somebody to be where you're at, pointing the finger at them and shunning them for not being there is not a good way to get them there. If you want people to respect your plight, turning yourself into somebody who's pointing the finger at them and telling them they ain't no good for not understanding or not having your plight ain't gonna get them any closer. So it's like, what is your goal? If your goal is to make it so that more people have more indifference toward what it is that you care about, then turn yourself into somebody who's going to point and shun them. You know what I mean? Because that'll definitely manifest that. But if you want people to care about what it is that you care about, then having a bit of zen, so to speak, about yourself as you're experiencing them, show you whatever it is that they have in them, is probably a better way to embrace whatever it is that ultimately will allow you to help them embrace you, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So, and that's what I'm gathering. It's just people not really knowing how to make the world what they want it to be, or how to coach the world into respecting what it is they want people to respect. And it's a lot of context that came from what it is that we've been paying attention to. It's a lot of this leads to this, and this is why this is so important. It's those folks over there, they control this, and that's why this is so important, that people are missing. They don't have those ties. So when they say that their candidate didn't win, so they're going to go back to Starbucks, they don't maybe understand why they are now supporting the same things that ultimately they still don't appreciate. because they don't have the context from which to understand how doing so is still paying into what it is ultimately they don't appreciate. They don't know that. Or when they say they don't care about, I've heard some people in my own community say, well, you didn't allow a black person to run the country, so now we don't care about the plight of what you're going through. Yeah, but that's because you didn't see all the stuff that those of us who have been watching this have seen. If you've seen what we've seen, then you'd be as intense about your opinions on the situation as we are. And if we're not going to show you those things, then we're not really helping you get it. And getting it is what is ultimately going to make you understand your responsibility within the circumstance. And so that context is important. I found myself a little frustrated too, listening to people in my community say we're going back to Starbucks. Like, if you like a Frappuccino as much as the next person, I don't blame you. Starbucks had some stuff I liked there too. They had breakfast sandwiches that I really liked back in the day. But when I found out where the money was going, and I had to witness what it is that the money was doing, suddenly I felt a little frustrated with Starbucks, if not a lot frustrated with Starbucks. And anybody else that was doing the same things that Starbucks was doing with investing their money in Israel. If you don't know why you should be upset with Israel, and the only reason why you were boycotting is because you want to support for your candidate, then you didn't really understand why you shouldn't feel the way that you do when your candidate lost. Because if you knew what we knew, then you'd know that your candidate was being paid by Israel, just like the opposing candidate was being paid by Israel. Like, that context and the being able to have experienced what it is that we've seen over the last 402 days in this genocide really helps people understand why they should care in a world where not caring is something that we've been coached into being. And that's what needs to be understood about the average American. We have to unlearn what has taught us how to be selfish in our own identity politics, selfish in our own strive to be at the top of the capitalistic totem pole. We need to be coached out of that. And if people don't have that true north, so to speak, to help answer some of their questions and provide new questions from which will be answered, then they're kind of working within the same mind that they were coached into in regards to what it is that they're doing. Politically, socially, etc. It's that information within those rabbit holes down Gaza way, so to speak, that help them understand why they need to think and choose and vote, so to speak, and move differently. It's that which helps us understand where certain things have gone wrong within what it is that we think within our country. Things that we support no longer holds that value. So you got to debunk some of the falsehoods that people believe in order to get them to support the movement. Otherwise, they're moving as if certain things are true within what it is that they support. And so a lot of people in my community, black people, a lot of white people, they felt like voting for their candidate was a way to get the treason out of the situation, out of our country, out of our government. They felt that was a way to get what they needed back if something was taken from them in their minds. They feel like if you let a black woman run the country, we've somehow won. Like, as black people, it's like, no, that's not. That's what was manipulated. That is exactly what they put her up there for, so that you would think that, so that you would vote her in, so that they can control her from behind the scenes. And they did the same thing with the other candidate as well. And if you notice, his behaviors and what it is he's about is attached to the politics, personal politics as well of the grand majority. So they figured if they control both of those politicians and control the whole House by way of their lobbying money that they use to buy all of our House of Representatives, all of our senators and all of that, is by way of those facts help us understand why we shouldn't be wrapped up in the idea of a presidential candidate representing our individual triumphs. You see what I'm saying? It's that context that helps us understand why that is something we shouldn't believe in anymore. Without that context, I just look like somebody who's going against my own people. So I can see why those who are within my community who believe that getting Kamala in office was ultimately the only way for black people. The reality is that wasn't the truth. That was not the truth. That she was put there so that we would think that way is the actual truth. That she was put there so that energy that we would have towards supporting a specific candidate that they control would be in place, and that we would have to choose between ourselves and others in regards to what it is that we did. That was put in place to cater to that vanity within us all. You know, we wouldn't pay attention to the policies because we'd be looking at the skin color. We wouldn't pay attention to the policies because we'd be looking at the representative pandering, so to speak, to our various communities and to our various interests. But that's what they're counting on, you guys. But if you can't make people understand that, and you're just giving them the aspects of that matter to you in regards to you being enlightened to all of this, the only thing they're going to feel like is you turning on them or choosing another people over them, for which the context of why they shouldn't think that way is not in place. So that's what needs to be understood. It's a lot of people who are upset. And people who are upset at those who would move away from Kamala Harris. There's a movement going around where people are, making blue bracelets. White people are wearing blue bracelets, letting black people know in their own way that it's safe to be around them, that they're not a racist like Trump. But the context behind why that is a lost cause isn't in place to help liberate them of the burden of those perspectives. You see what I'm saying? That context is deliberately kept from the people so that they don't have those concepts in their head. They don't know, literally don't know, that that's not for them to even consider, because neither one of those candidates represent the people that they are pandering to at all. And they actually represent a third party who's behind them, paying for both sides, as we've already said. A ruling class party that doesn't have any interest in providing all of us within our little communities what we ultimately would be most pleased with. They're more interested in moving the way they want to move, which just so happens to be genocide. Some people who understand that don't care. They're deeply depraved and evil. They don't care about genocide. They only care about themselves. And furthermore, if you dig into their closets, you probably find awful things in it. If you dig into their search history, you'll probably find things that'll probably put them away for life. Those are those individuals who are liberated to the understanding and still support the genocide. But not anybody with any sense is going to actually support that. You have to either be raised like that or be evil like that. You know what I mean? And so that's why they have to move around us in such a way to get people in place who will uphold those behaviors without question, because it will otherwise be deemed in their eyes upholding themselves and what matters to them and they people, that would ultimately keep those people in office or allow them people to be the only people that we would consider worthy of our vote. And that's what they knew we were too far deep into to actually look at it in a different way, is what I'm trying to say. We're too deep into that. They know that it's going to take about 12 years for people to undo a lot of that madness. They know that. And so with only like a year left, it's like, okay, we're doing this, so how do we get people in place? Well, this is how we do it. You put that person over there representing them, you put that person over there representing them, and pay them both. Pay them both. That way, whichever one the people ultimately choose, we have control over either one of them. This is what they did. And the third party candidate who was not paid by them, who wanted to stop what they were doing, didn't have a chance in hell. Because everybody's voting with themselves in mind, or trying to be in solidarity with what matters most to them in mind, instead of being in solidarity with the understanding that's hidden from us. You know what I mean? With the people who are actually suffering based on what it is that's being chosen. Make you think it's about something else. That's really what it's about. Get people all up in arms about reproductive rights Because that's ironclad. And you really consider it, that's ironclad. People are going to fight to the death in regards to being able to reproduce, and other people are going to fight them to the death in regards to being able to control whether or not they're able to. You know, whether or not they're able to end pregnancy and all that. People are going to fight to the death for that. It's ironclad, so they can build the entire election around that point, get the two representative pandering polar opposites candidates in place, pay both of them, and then move forward that way. That way, good half of the country is going to be so far into the nonsense in regards to these conversations that they're never going to look over at Gaza, and they're going to look at the people who are talking about Gaza and say, well, you're going to get in the way of our right to do what it is that we ultimately believe we should in regards to our reproductive rights. So even though we care a lot about what you're talking about, not nearly as much as we care about ourselves, and they pander to that selfishness that all of us were coached into. As I keep on speaking in circles, I hope you guys are getting what I'm saying. So without people actually hearing this point of view that helps them understand what it is that they've been coerced into, there's really no context for which the actual options hold any value. You know what I mean? When you really look at it, it's like the lie is so tight that the truth that comes from the options that come from knowing the truth, the best options that come from knowing the truth, don't actually hold any weight until that for which it debunks the lie is actually understood by those who are voting, and by those who are wrapped up so tight in regards to how they feel about such things. So that's really what it comes down to. Until we can educate people on a large enough scale of the formulas that make people devoted to these policies, to these politicians, to these parties, we're not going to be able to really get people to do what we know we should be doing as a unit in this country. Voting the way we need to vote, divesting from whom we need to divest from. Until people know why they shouldn't believe in what they do, and why they should just throw away a lot of what it is they believe in regards to these conversations, they're going to wear the hat that comes with that in regards to making certain decisions. They're thinking with that brain aligned with those truths. And that brain is going to have them choosing differently than what the truth would ultimately provide them. Thinking what the truth then allows them to choose from. So that's what it is, man. We got to educate people, man. It ain't. We got to be open-minded if we're not yet educated to understanding that people who are talking like me may know something that you need to know. That those of us who are paying attention to these different things that ultimately provide us this context have that context because of what we're paying attention to, and that you should pay attention to it as well, is important. To start going down that rabbit hole, it's important. But you got to be curious enough to say, yeah, some of the stuff about what it is I believe in just doesn't align right with my morals. The consequences of what it is that we ultimately align to have us picking between two evils, and there has to be a better way. All of these different things got to be in your head to make you curious enough to go down that rabbit hole with us, down the Palestine rabbit hole, the Gaza rabbit hole. It helps. But you got to first care enough to say that what you're doing doesn't work in order to go down that rabbit hole. And I think that's where a lot of people are yet to go. But the more they see people awaken, the more they see people disrupting the status quo, interrupting their favorite candidate from talking by considering yelling and doing all types of demonstrations to raise awareness for these concepts that provide that context. The more and more you start seeing people doing that, the more you'll see people become more curious about what it is that those people are so passionate about. That's why it's so important that people on this side who understand what's going on keep being as disruptive as we've been, because that is going to liberate a lot of people. It's going to take time, but it's going to liberate a lot of people. We continue to have these conversations, continue to point out what it is we know is there, continue to point out what it is we know needs to be pointed out in regards to showing people that true north. You know, giving people the understanding that this is wrong, giving people to understand that who they believe in is bought and paid for. All these different things. Showing them that their media is no good, showing them that their Their celebrities have been quiet this entire time, which is in cater to the why they're cloaked in that space where they don't know what their true options should be. It's because the people that you trusted have lied to you and or kept truths from you or didn't know them truths themselves to raise awareness toward you. And that was by design. By the same people that ultimately you're supporting when you buy things that, you know, these people were trying to hurt Palestine are ultimately selling you. You understand that these people have been controlling your media. It's why you believe what you believe. They've been doing a number on your mind with the different formulas that they use all over the world on different peoples to get them to believe whatever it is they believe. And then when you start becoming aware that these are formulas used against you, that the world that you're in is not the only world there is in regards to your bubble in this country, that everybody in these other places, a lot of cases, they believe their world is their bubble, or rather that the only thing that exists is how they do things, and that you're not much different than them in the sense that you got to unlearn what it is you got to unlearn, just like they got to unlearn what it is they got to unlearn, so that we can have conversations with one another, provide the context from which why we should care about one another, why we should be relatable to one another, or feel we are one with one another in our various plights all over the world. We're not that much different in a lot of cases. And thus, what is happening to them could eventually happen to us, eventually, if we keep letting it be something that we ignore when it happens to them. And so as we continue to have these conversations, we'll get there, man. But we can't deteriorate our patience with reactions to those who are still in the dark, reacting to them as if them being in the dark is offensive to us, or reacting to them as if them not understanding this is something that is just so egregious, like the world hasn't been around us, hasn't been coached into being that way. It has definitely been coached into being that way. We've been manipulated into being indifferent. We've been manipulated into being selfish. We've been manipulated into being obsessed with our own identity politics and believing that the only people we can relate to are the people who look like us, think like us, sex like us, pray like us. That was not natural. That was by design. People put us in those places, did a number on our minds, made the culture around us so that we didn't ask the right questions, made us support things that would otherwise keep us distracted, made us idolize things that would otherwise distract us and lie to us about what represents our last names properly. It's a lot that's been working against your mind. It's a lot that's been working against the common American's mind that would keep you from making the right decisions or identifying the proper choices when trying to be a good person in this world. It's a lot of stuff they put on your head so that you would specifically stay away from certain things that you would otherwise care very much about without the application of that brainwashing. And so when we start to learn more and more about this and start to waking up to more of this understanding, we're going to realize that we're victims to this. We're victims to the people who've done this to us. All of us are victims to the brainwashing that would make us align with one side or another in regards to how we vote, not caring that so much of what it is that we do affects other people in such horrific and painful ways, and that we shouldn't care for whatever set of reasons. That's a warped way of brainwashing a society. And the more we awaken to the understanding that other societies have been brainwashed, the more we can start to have the notion, the foggiest idea that the same has been done to us. And that's all it takes, man. It's just the foggiest notion, like, yeah, we could be. Look how lost those people are. Look what they're supporting. Look what they think is funny. How did that become that way? Well, their propaganda machine was moving in a direction that would otherwise course them in that way from birth. Even their childhood books taught them how to be that way. And guess what? That same application was done to you as a child as well, in a different way for different subjects, different norms. You were taught to pledge allegiance to the flag since you were 5 years old. And if they would have taught you how to spin around on your head, then you would have spin around on your head. And if they told you go to jail for not doing it, then you'd make sure you do it every morning. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's not Very few of us have actually created the cultures from which we celebrate. Very few of us actually created what it is that we choose around us. A lot of this stuff was just put here and you chose from what you had. Very few creatives, man. People are looking to be followed and led. And by way of that following and leading has a manipulation and people dreaming up ways of messing with that in such a way to move society so that they support certain things and ignore other things. And the one thing that they need to do in this place is make it perfectly fine for people to walk around and not really care about the suffering of others so much as to say, I'm going to give more than I can afford to give. That's not what we do. If it doesn't inconvenience me, then we're willing to do for others. Otherwise, I'm sorry, I just can't help you. That's how we've been set up from a baseline mindset, from the most basic of things. And with that, builds up certain things that make it so that we really don't care about what's going on outside of our surroundings. We really don't care so long as we're comfortable. Am I comfortable with what they're doing to those people? No, but I'm so sorry, because if I do anything about it, it's going to inconvenience my life. It's going to mess with my well-being. I'm going to get shunned by the people that I care about. I'm going to be outcasted by the people that matter to me. And this culture that we're in makes it so that that's the worst thing in the world. Not those people suffering over there and that it's my fault, but that I'm outcasted by people that are cool, because cool is most important. And so it's like when you've been coerced into that space, and that's how you've been raised, and everybody around you raised that way, the few of us who have a notion that there's something wrong with that sound absolutely insane. But just the same, it's on people like myself to try to raise awareness to that, because a lot of disruptions on this earth, a lot of suffering, a lot of people dying, a lot of people being treated absolutely horribly has been done by way of that indifference and us paying into the agendas of those who benefit most from that propaganda, who benefit most from that brainwashing, who benefit most from that indifference, who benefit most from that culture. And a lot of the evil things that happen all over the world that we otherwise would be absolutely appalled with if they happen on our block are happening because we don't care about anything going on outside of our block. And that's what this country needs to wake up to and understand, that it's okay to move on from. You will still survive. You will still thrive. You'll still have good days. You'll still be able to enjoy your cultures and things of that nature outside of that thinking, outside of the behaviors that align with that thinking. You can thrive. You don't have to be afraid to divest away from that energy. And that's what people need to come to terms with once the truth comes around. That you're not the center of the world and it's okay not to be. You know what I'm saying? That you're going to find a way amongst one another to work outside of that for which is over our heads, that has such horrible agendas outside of the place we're in. Some people are too afraid to be a part of taking the power away from the powers that be because they don't know how they will function without the powers that be controlling things. That's part of what needs to not be anymore. So that's what it is I'm trying to say, man. I don't expect this to be anything that happens overnight. I do not expect people are going to get this right now. This is going to age well, I believe. But Palestine has opened all of our eyes who are paying attention to it, to the notion of all of these different things. All these different things. It's given us an understanding that maybe, just maybe, the foggiest notion that something wrong is going on with how we think or how we were raised and what we were given generationally in regards to what should matter, what doesn't matter, how we go about our lives, the various different cultures that prioritize money and status and flashy things. Years and years and years, generations and generations passing us forward to make it so that that is the only norm that we roll with, so to speak. And that very thing was put in place those years ago so that it would pass forward the very indifference that we engage in right now, that allows for people who have all the money in the world and all the power in the world to do the worst things to people who don't have a damn thing, and allows them the opportunity to blast the notion that this is okay through all of what it is they control, and they control all of it because of what it is that's been passed forward that they've controlled for generations, and that those two things are exactly intertwined, that it is not separate, that they can do that because you think like this. That context is going to save the world someday. But until we have it, it's very little we can do, man. It's very little we can do in regards to making people who don't have it respect the things that need to be respected when one has it. That's what I'm here to say, man. So you live long enough, you learn these things, man. It ain't just as simple as, oh, that's nice, I want that. No, there are real bad things happening because of your inability to control your wants. People are manipulating the hell out of that reality. And they're doing evil stuff with it, and they're getting away with it because of it. It's because of it. And so that's what I'm here to tell people, man. They got as powerful and as rich as they are because of, not only because of all that they own and the legality behind all that they own, but because of our opinions and helping them uphold it. Our opinions is where their true power lies. Because as long as we're along with it, as long as we go along with it, as long as we have our esteem wrapped up in it, then it's ironclad. That we're always going to vote for those they can use to control the laws that allow for them to do the things that they do. Once our opinions change, then they can no longer utilize the laws the same way, because we're going to continue to fight against those laws being in place. But if they can control our opinions and sway us toward allowing them to control things that ultimately make things legal, we're always going to be in a position where we're underneath that legality. And then furthermore, they'll continue to put the brainwashing, stuff on top of that, so that we will then be afraid of what happens when we break those laws. Meanwhile, we're watching them and their cronies break international laws. So they're showing us by way of their behavior how to overcome them. But we're supposed to be not willing to think like that, because it's rude to think that way. And all the different things that break down within our agreements, once we buck the very thing that ultimately they uphold, while they're bucking the very things that's supposed to hold them accountable. And so that's what I'm here to tell everybody, man. When the people get upset, they burn things down. Martial law comes out, and then it's martial law versus the people. And we outnumber them. And that's the secret of martial law. People become compliant when they see guns in their faces. That's the reality of it. But every zombie movie you've ever seen is showing you how to overcome that. Some people just got to push through that and get shot, and the rest of them overpower those who when they run out of bullets. If people move together like zombies, things get done, man. That's the reality of it. The frontliners gonna die. The backliners kill the guys who are killing the frontliners. That's literally how that goes. We always outnumber the armies, but they know they can control us by way of the mental power over our fears, having us each and every one of us considering ourselves instead of the collective and the bigger picture. And when it's time for you to consider the collective and the bigger picture, when people are out here killing children, and you call yourself a grown person, you don't want to move like a zombie when it's time to overcome that nonsense, because you're too busy thinking about your own interests as an individual, instead of the notion that they're literally wiping out the next generation of your people, that they're erasing whole races from the earth because of your selfishness, cowardice, and fear, and unwillingness to listen to people who are saying this here. That's exactly what it is. You would much rather listen to somebody who has a lot of money, because that culture has made it so that over time you've worshipped their money. You have worshipped their status, you've worshipped the fame, and that is manipulatable, and they've used that against you the whole time to build their wealth and build their leverage against you. So as long as you're upholding that, you're always paying into them. As long as you view the world that way, you're always paying into them. It's ironclad until it's not. And that's the point. It's ironclad until it's not. Until y'all just say, nah, I'm not rolling. Nah, that's crap. We're not doing that no more. When your opinion changes, then the world changes. then they need to recalibrate an entirely different way to control you. Or they lose control completely when your opinion changes. So they're going to do everything they can to keep your opinion from changing. They're going to do everything they can to keep you law-abiding, and they're going to move those laws that allow them to move around those laws and so on and so forth. And then you get the energy that comes from witnessing the people who benefit from that the most act like petulant children celebrating the erasing of an entire race of people. That's exactly what you see. That's what happens when this ironclad garbage gets so far out of control in regards to who benefits from it. Then you see what's going on in Israel. That's like the final version of completely and utterly spoiled energy. When you could just spoil beyond the wildest imagination of anybody in this environment, you become what they are. The ultimate devil's person, like the ultimate. Self-serving, little resilience, moving in a way that makes it so that no wisdom comes in whatsoever. You know, genocidal to the max. And laughing the whole way through. Exactly what the devil wants you to become. Doing nothing to represent yourself in any other way than the worst person in the world. That's exactly what he wants you to be. Everything Israel is right now. That's what he wants everybody to be. And as long as we're moving in a direction that keeps us on this path, eventually a generation of us will be that bad. That's where this capitalism crap is headed. That's where all of this upholding of famous people who don't have any substance, chasing money, worrying about my people and forget your people, warring in the streets and drug worship and all these different types of weird stuff that we do. That's where it's headed. If we don't change our opinions and start to undo what keeps it ironclad, we will become the greater Israel. We will be greater Israel. That's what it's going to be. So I want people to understand that, man. I want people to understand that. We can't just continue to move as if what we're doing is fine and that after we die, nothing goes on after us and we don't care what happens after us because we got ours and that's it. That's exactly the indifference the current powers that be want the living generations today to be. Indifferent to the sufferings of others, indifferent to the suffering of their own people later on. Only interested in what happens to them, how much they can accumulate now, and continuing to empower them as they benefit from all of it. Every single bit of it. So that's what I want people to know, man. That is exactly what I have to say. I don't want to leave nothing out here as it pertains to having not said what I need to say. I want to leave it all on the table. I don't know when the Lord is going to call my number or what my future holds, what my fate will be or what have you. I don't know if He's going to allow me to keep doing this or if they're going to cut my voice off at some point. I want to say it all. I want to help change the culture of keeping things ironclad for the Zionist supremacists or anyone that would otherwise mimic their behavior in years in the future. I want to make it very difficult for anybody to ever do this again. May no man, whether they feel or believe they are chosen or not, ever mimic what those who believe they're chosen today have done. I don't care if it's a book written that's been in place for thousands and thousands of years. Never think that it's okay to slaughter people because you feel like it. To harm children because you feel like it and make fun of those sufferings. To coerce other people by way of your lies into being complicit in that behavior. That is the worst thing that a human being can do, in my opinion, outside of some of the stuff that's already been done. But that going forward, that's the worst thing we could be, is what the Israelis have allowed themselves to become. So that's pretty much what I gotta say, man. I hope y'all listening. I hope you care about what I'm saying. I hope you've gotten the foggiest notion of why you should start looking at this stuff to what we've been talking about. Have a little bit of faith, you know. All it takes is a mustard seed of faith to really control your self against the enemy. You know what I mean? It takes a little bit of faith to believe in something greater than yourself, to give you all of the context necessary to never allow you to be manipulated by the devil again. You know what I mean? That's what it takes. It's a little bit of faith. You don't need all of it. There's some. We're strong enough to overcome all of this, man. We're strong enough to see to it that the future happens. You know what I mean? These people don't get to destroy the world. That's what it really comes down to. They don't get to destroy our reputation in the world. They don't get to do that. Just because they control a bunch of stuff in 2024, they're not as powerful as they think they are. They're as powerful as they need to be today. But for all time, they're not as powerful as they want people to think they are. If they were, it wouldn't be nearly as much resistance to that energy that they're getting. Wouldn't be none of this stuff going on in Amsterdam. Wouldn't be nobody interrupting any politicians. It wouldn't be none of that going on if they were as powerful as they need us to believe they are. That's the God's honest truth. None of these conversations would be had at all. And so that's what I want people to understand, man. Waking up is imminent. The question is how are you going to react to the truth when it comes? It's coming because these conversations are happening more and more. The more you go, you can't escape it. The question is, what are you going to do when you get there? When you become awake, are you going to shun somebody else who's yet to wake up? Are you going to have no patience with people who are still resistant to the truth that you have now absorbed? Like, these are the questions that are real. The truth comes with a lot of responsibility, and that is to help coach those who have yet to absorb it, to help create an environment for which that absorption can be possible without the distraction of defending oneself. You understand what I'm saying? A peaceful space from which to absorb the truth. That's an underrated thing when considering waking people up. If I'm constantly swinging at everybody who's mad at me for not absorbing the truth quicker, it's harder for me to care about the things I need to care about when that truth comes my way, man. You gotta be patient with people. And it's not easy. It is hard. People will offend you with their little sensitivity to a lot of things that you already understand. But just like you had to wake up to the truth, so does that man. And so that's my point of view. I'm not here to bash people for not getting what it is I understand. Just like I hope those who want to wake me up in other areas aren't going to bash me when I show that I'm ignorant to what it is they know. That ignorance is not to be shunned, it's to be coached through. And that when I know better, then I will do better. But while I don't know better, you can't demand that I do better and then bring harm to me for not understanding. That display does nothing. Nothing. But bring me further away from the truth and further away from what I need to absorb it. So that's what I want to say, man. So a lot of people are going to be waking up very soon in regards to these different conversations. And that's going to be the challenge for a lot of us who've been paying attention for a long time. Is how do we handle those people as they go through the threshold of being in denial about, can't believe this is happening. What does the world come to? All of those moments, they're going to need a peaceful space from which to exist while they're going through that. And if you're going to get the support for your thing that you need, you got to let people go through that, man. You cannot push them away. Because that's exactly what the enemy wants you to do, is push them away. Make them feel like the worst people in the world for being on level 1 because you've been on level 30 for the last 20 years. That's not how that works. So that's what I'm here to do. I'm trying to help people understand that. And we move from there, man. It gets better, but we're going to have to go through some difficulties just like any other challenge, man. But with the difficulties come the strength and the understanding and know-how how to work together, and the understanding and belief that you can absorb certain difficulties, confidence that comes from that. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of fruit in that. those who make life really easy for themselves in every which way, they don't understand that context. There's a lot of fruit that comes from going through difficulties and being held accountable and all of that stuff. You learn so much about yourself. You learn how to control your ego and all these different things that hold so much weight when you're trying to survive in a frustrating circumstance through the difficulties of going through other difficulties and circumstances. You understand what I'm saying? So we got to allow people to get that context, man. We're building our army, so to speak, as it pertains to the truth and how we're going to overcome that for which is coming down on our heads propaganda-wise and all these different things. You got to build an army, man. And that is not done overnight. So I accept people who are, who are different in that way. You may not understand why you should care so much about my plight, but maybe you want me to think that you care. That's all I need. I can give you the truth from there. That's good enough. You want to make a bracelet to let me know that you're not racist? Cool. Now look at this truth I got for you. Check out this truth I got for you. That's how you handle that. You don't sit there and say, y'all so ridiculous, this, that. No. Yeah. You now got the way in to their soul, to their mind, so that they can be receptive to what it is that'll give them a better understanding. That's all you need. Sometimes that's all it takes. A friendship bracelet, hey, I'm not a bad guy. Well, guess what? If you really mean that, listen to this. Let me show you what's going on over there. Let me tell you who's paying for this over here. Do you know that you don't even need to support me that way? And maybe the person who looks like me doesn't know that because of this and that and the third. And look at that. And check this out. Hey, read this. Check out this documentary. Read that. Then, when they absorb all that truth, they're gonna love differently. They're gonna think differently. They're gonna absorb things differently. They're gonna believe differently, and they're gonna teach somebody else. And I'm telling you, that's how you win in these battles. That's how you win these battles. Be there 44. I thank y'all for watching. I'm out.